Bungie. They made this guy. And this. I'm not here to talk about this though. This was their magnum opus. So I'm only going to be covering the single player in this review, but bear in mind the multiplayer was a major part of this title. Plus, I'm going to go ahead and review both at once. I'll explain why a little later, just know that the footage you're seeing is taken from both titles. I have a hard time even categorizing this game, it's so utterly unique. The internet calls it real-time tactics, but I've never played anything quite like it. The nearest I can think of is the Total War series. There is no resource management, base building, or level grinding. You are given a specific set of troops each level, and you better take care of them because you are always outnumbered and outgunned. You have nothing to rely on but battlefield tactics, and the AI is just cruel. Almost too cruel. They are not here to entertain your power fantasy, they are here to win. They will stay just out of arrow shot, lure you into traps, and these fucking things. These guys will stay on the periphery the whole fight, and the very nanosecond you forget about them, they are already killing your archers. The physics engine feels almost anachronistic for a game made in 1997. Everything can be interacted with. Dropped weapons, lost limbs, probably this guy's intestines, I don't know. Every projectile is dependent on this system, and getting your archers and dwarves to the high ground can make or break a battle. And don't get me started on the dwarves. They are your biggest liability and your only real advantage. But man, are they effective. We're gonna win this war with Molotov cocktails.
Whoa! Wait till I tell Balin about this one.
So besides gameplay, what does this game have going for it? Once again, music and atmosphere. If you've played Halo, you know its iconic theme. Sound design was an incredible part of that series, and composer Martin O'Donnell's work with Bungie started right here. The story of Myth sounds generic on the surface, but it is absolutely rich. It is a story of history endlessly repeating itself, but not told from the perspective of heroes or kings, but from a common foot soldier with a limited view and understanding of the end of the world, and his narrations absolutely define this game. Not only does he get across the growing dread and bleakness of their plight, but he manages to convey a real sense of grim hope.
Tuesday, May 19th, the edge of Forest Heart. It's spring again, and after 5 months of rest, the Legion is once more on the move. Last week we passed through 7 gates into the eastern lands over the cloud spine. The Fallen seem to have abandoned the mountains, but for what reason we cannot tell. The Legion is here alone, camped on the edge of Forest Heart, and dangerously far into the territory of the enemy. 2 of the 9 are with us, Kulroy and Mergen, trying to make contact with the forest giants who live in this place to beg their help against the dark. No man has seen one of the giants since the first battle for 7 Gates 13 years ago. They helped contain the fury of Balor himself for 3 years, but on the 4th they did not return, and the pass was lost. One of our scouts just came crashing through the brush, winded, and a crowd of excited men has gathered around him. Someone hurrying out of the group paused beside me long enough to say, "Soul Blighter is here. Put that in your journal."
Sadly, this gravitas doesn't quite carry over to the missions themselves, as limited voice acting during gameplay can be pretty stilted.
The path to retribution does make for strange bedfellows. Would you not agree, Ravana?
I have no major complaints about this one. The initial learning curve is kinda steep, and it can be hard to know where to go or what to do in some missions. And when you get the hang of it, you end up employing the same strategies frequently, as there's not a lot of unit variation. But it never feels stale. There's plenty of variety in the form of environments, mission objectives, and unit compositions. So at the start I mentioned reviewing the sequel. See, getting the first game to run stable on any kind of modern machine, especially with Windows 8, is a pain in the ass, and the community has completely abandoned it. The sequel, however, released in '99, still has a somewhat lively community, as the last fan-made update was 2 years ago, and everything runs perfectly smooth, and surprisingly at 60 frames per second. Plus, they were kind enough to rebuild the entirety of the original game inside the sequel's engine using the old maps and files. It may not be 100% accurate, but you'd have to be a purist to notice or care. This is the version I ended up having to use to record all this. The only thing you're going to miss out on with this option is the animated cutscenes. While they're only about 6 or 7 minutes worth of content, and they don't add a lot to the story, it is still a shame they couldn't come with a conversion. You can just watch them all on YouTube, I guess. The sequel itself brought a lot of welcome gameplay upgrades, and a ton of new unit types. Coming straight out of the first game, I was surprised just how much more streamlined it all felt. The maps all look and play better, with greater gameplay variety. Picking up 60 years after the events of Myth, the game starts out calm, but has things quickly spiraling out of control as the fallen lords that survived the first game make a grand return. There are several nods to previous events and locations packed in that tie it all together, and though the journal entries are from the perspective of a different soldier, it still has the same fantastic voice work. However, the story simply doesn't pack the same emotional punch as the original. It seems in a big hurry to raise the stakes, and many of the missions feel more like set pieces than part of a narrative, but I'm probably being too critical. The epilogue does help fill in the lore, and overall I'd say it's definitely the better game. It's also worth mentioning that this very nearly launched with one of the most epic bugs in history. It was so bad that Bungie employees supposedly went out to the manufacturer, tore open boxes, and replaced all the CDs. Reportedly, this cost as much to fix as it did to develop the whole game. I won't go into the details, but basically, if installed a certain way, the game could potentially wipe the entire contents of your hard drive at root level. It seems unlikely this would have affected many people, but rather than try to fix it with a patch, they took the high ground and fixed it before it was out the door. After Myth 2, things start to get a little murky. I'm not entirely sure who owns the rights at this point, but back in 2000, when Microsoft bought Bungie, the rights to Myth transferred over to Take-Two Interactive, who owned a large chunk of the company at the time. They then hired another developer to create the third game in the series. I haven't played it, but it got pretty mixed reviews, and as soon as it was finished, the entire team was laid off. The series just kind of vanished after that. It's not available on Steam or even GOG. I heard it was on GameTap at some point, but I couldn't find it. The fan community thrived for a surprisingly long time, but it's been about 18 years at this point, and it looks like they're starting to drift apart. It breaks my heart to see such a great game fall into obscurity. As a little bonus trivia, the original concept of Halo was that of a real-time strategy game, quote, myth in a sci-fi universe. Microsoft did eventually release Halo Wars, but that wasn't Bungie, and I'm not getting into that one right now. Finally, every Bungie-developed Halo game has had the same Easter egg hiding in it, referencing this lost franchise. I'll leave it to you to figure that one out.